Hello, and welcome to Trip the Beltway Fantastic. New York politics is exploding this week as its mayor, Eric Adams, has been indicted on charges of bribery, wire fraud, and seeking illegal campaign donations from foreign sources. In the latest revelations, gleaned from an unsealed document, or indictment rather, on Thursday, the Democratic mayor allegedly took millions of dollars from Turkish companies and the Turkey government during his campaign in 2021. Not surprisingly, the Turks allegedly started asking for favors immediately after Adams won his election, and in which is probably the most powerful mayoral seat in the United States. In a press conference, the mayor was defiant. "I am the mayor of the city of New York. From here, my attorneys will take care of the case so I can take care of the city. My day-to-day will not change. I will continue to do the job for 8.3 million New Yorkers that I was elected to do." But the accusations against him come amid a litany of other scandals in which U.S. politicians can't seem to say no to foreign influence, whether it be direct campaign contributions or luxury gifts, all in exchange for serving as a conduit for influence in Washington, or in Adams' case, the state of New York. So to talk more about this are my Quincy Institute colleagues and friends, Ben Freeman and Nick Cleveland-Stout. They both focus on campaign finance corruption, foreign influence, lobbying, transparency, and the revolving door for our organization's Democratizing Foreign Policy project. Thanks for joining me, guys, on Trip the Beltway. Fantastic.
Great to be here, Kelly. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Ben, you just wrote a piece for Responsible Statecraft about the unsealed indictment of Eric Adams. Can you kind of set the table for us and tell us exactly what he is being accused of here?
Yeah, happy to. Frankly, this indictment was a long time coming. We've sort of been getting these like breadcrumbs of this Department of Justice investigation now for almost a year, at least 10 months, going back to last November. We heard of a search warrant issued, witnesses investigated. And we've been hearing word of this coming for a while now. So today, in some ways, it was sort of like, Christmas for foreign influence nerds like Nick and I, where we got to actually see what the FBI found. And what this indictment reveals is it's extraordinary, frankly. It's a 10-year long campaign where Adams, he sought improper benefits, including luxury travel to Turkey and other places, and got significant contributions to his campaign. We know, for example, that this was no small amount of money either. The indictment counts more than $123,000 in gifts and travel benefits and other perks that Adams directly got. His campaign got tens of thousands of dollars in illegal campaign contributions, which they allege he then concealed the source of so he could get $10 million in matching public campaign funds from the city of New York. So, we're not talking trivial numbers here. We're talking about, literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, changing hands, and, the people of New York on the hook for $10 million because of all of this. So really extraordinary in that sense. And also extraordinary in that this is the first time in New York City's history that you have a mayor of, the sort of capital of the world in some cases. We're just getting out of the UN General Assembly week in New York, where, the world leaders come to New York. And now the head of that city gets indicted for the first time in New York City's history, that a sitting mayor gets indicted on these federal charges. And it's, the details in the indictment are, it just documents this extraordinary decades-long campaign of Turkish government and Turkish business officials courting Adams, and then Adams in turn doing some things to benefit the government of Turkey. So the government seems to have a very strong case going forward, despite Adams' protestations.
So, Nick, what are some of the more outrageous things that you've identified in the indictment? I realize it's Thursday afternoon. This thing is still being reported, and people are poring over the details. But what's jumped out at you at like the most outrageous things in this case so far, or alleged? We'll say alleged.
Yeah, so I think I would lump them into two buckets. On the one hand, there's the personal benefits that Adams was receiving. Um, the indictment alleges some $120,000 worth of free luxury travel with Turkish Airlines um, that he took to fly to India, Hungary, Ghana, all across the world. And you can actually see it's very brazen, these conversations that his staffer was having with people connected to Turkish Airlines. At one point, there's a text message conversation where they try to come up with a price that seems real, even though he was flying business to all these places. And the Turkish Airlines person throws out $50 and the Adam staffer counters with $1,000. So there's this real kind of paper trail to cover that up. And then, so that's one bucket. And then on the other hand, there's also these illegal campaign contributions. And there's like a very clear moment when you can see when this scheme started to get cooked up, according to the indictment. And that was in June 2018, when Adams, he was the borough president. He had his sights on the mayor's office. And it was actually proposed by this Turkish businessman and the staffer, basically to give contributions to these straw donors that would then donate to the mayor's campaign. And because New York City has this matching funds program that for small contributions that matches it up to 8 times, then Adams raked in over $10 million in public funds. And it's unclear exactly how much of that comes from foreign sources. But, just to give context, like his entire campaign used about $18 million. And so those public funds were over half of that.
Wow. That's pretty intense.
Yeah. And then there's also a very clear moment when, it becomes clear that there are strings attached. And the prosecutors alleged that Adams and his staff were aware that there were these strings attached this entire time. And in fall of 2021, then they again have this phone call, Adam staffer and a Turkish official, in which they say, okay, now it's time for us to cash in on these favors. I believe the exact phrase they use to the staffer is, it's your turn to support Turkey. And so the staffer relays this to Adams, and Adams says, I know.
Unbelievable. So they're calling in their chits.
They're calling it in. Who among us has not accepted over $100,000 in luxury airline tickets? And
I think it's so rare too to like that, like direct, quid pro quo to just be unsealed in an indictment is so rare. Usually we see, we usually get a lot of smoke in foreign influence investigations.
Mm-hmm.
We can kind of put 2 and 2 together, but it's really rare to get that like direct smoking gun like this. I think that's why this indictment, heads are going to roll over this for a while.
Yeah, and Nick and I were talking offline a little bit about this vignette about the Turkish embassy building, and there being 60 defects in terms of the fire codes, and they told Eric Adams that he had to approve these permits or else, and Eric Adams told a fire official, I don't have it right in front of me, marshal, that if they didn't clear the way, they'd be losing their jobs.
Yeah. So that's exactly what the Turkish official was referring to in the conversation with the Adams staffer. They had this big trip planned for Erdogan to go to New York. The opening of this Turkish what's known as the Turkish House, this 36-story skyscraper in New York City. But they were having some difficulties. They didn't think it seemed like it wasn't going to be able to open in time for Erdogan's visit, because it hadn't received a certificate from the New York City Fire Department, because there were over 60 defects. I really feel for whatever New York City Fire Department staffer had to send out this email and try to explain to his boss, hey, this building should not open, only for his boss to fire back with, well, you might get fired because we're receiving pressure from the mayor's office saying we should bypass all this red tape, which, again, exists for a reason.
Yeah, and if anything had happened in terms of public safety because of those defects and the fact that the permits were approved regardless of them, I mean, people could have died. I mean, I don't know what the defects were allegedly, but this gets right to the heart of public safety. Like, this isn't just campaign contributions and, airline tickets and whatnot. This is, they are literally putting a New Yorkers' lives on the line because Eric Adams wanted to get extra funding for his 2021 campaign.
And these are the people, the people whose lives were put in danger by that are the people Adams is actually supposed to represent, the people
Right.
in the city of New York. And instead, he's allegedly selling out to foreign interests to put the interests of his own people well behind them and risk their lives. It's unbelievable.
Well, my question is, what can he do for Turkey? Now, we know he can make sure those permits get approved and they can move into their skyscraper embassy building. That's one thing, but they asked for lobbying. They made this comment about how now we can push our lobby. I don't know what the exact words were, but we can push our issues through Eric Adams. What can he possibly do to help Turkey on the foreign policy front? What am I missing here?
Right. I mean, the exact quote from the indictment was, this is from one of the handlers, one of the folks who helped facilitate all these illegal contributions. He said, I'm going to go and talk to our elders in Ankara, capital Turkey, about how we can turn this into an advantage for our country's lobby, end quote. And so, he's making it clear that they see this illicit influence operation as part and parcel of their legal influence operation. And I had written about this previously with the Center for International Policy. I wrote a report for them about Turkey's lobby. Turkey spends millions of dollars a year on its legal lobbying and PR machine in the U.S. I'll be frank with you. They suck. They're not. I don't normally say this about foreign. Most of the foreign lobbies that we look at, Nick and I look at, they're really good. The Saudi lobby, the Qataris, the Emiratis, all these folks, they're very savvy. They often get what they want. The Turkey lobby, not so much. They're a bit clunky.
I'll say.
Yeah, they don't. They don't get the job done. And so, but what we start to see more and more is that countries who aren't getting the job done through the legal avenues, they start to turn to these illicit influence operations. And then they start to use these things hand in hand. And so the fact that you have that statement in the indictment, that's, again, a smoking gun that all of this is connected. Like we shouldn't think of these illicit operations as being, just totally in a separate thing from the legal influence operations too. It's clear that even these bad guys who are mentioned in these illegal indictments, they're thinking about how to leverage this and all those legal mechanisms. And when you start talking about those legal mechanisms, it's arms sales to Turkey. Turkey is a U.S. ally under NATO. Mm-hmm. So, this can involve, troop movements, how are we going to defend Turkey, missile placements, all of these things come up in Turkey's lobbying. Are we going to recognize the Armenian genocide? All of these other issues come up in the legal lobbying operations. And so for them, having somebody like a mayor, like Eric Adams, who knows what they could do? I really think when you look at this, like the fire department issue, this fire chief pressure, that's the tip of the iceberg for what they can do. And, frankly, like that's small potatoes for Turkey. When you're talking about a government, that gets a lot of money from the U.S. in arms, that's really the type of stuff they're gunning for. And, they're not as worried about these consulates.
So are they wasting their money with Eric Adams because maybe they're frustrated? You're saying that they're not really good at this lobbying thing. What is I'm trying to look at it from this perspective. Maybe a lot of that money was coming from Turkish companies and they wanted some sort of edge in real estate or whatever business empires they were trying to cultivate there in Gotham City. Beyond that, what can a big city mayor do for Turkey on all these other issues that you mentioned? I mean, that seems like a Washington centric strategy, but in New York. So is it they just figured, here's a guy who's receptive to taking our money and influence, so we'll just slush it at him? And
he was the only one that responded to that email, I guess, where they were
yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it sort of reminds me of like that famous Jack Abramoff quote where he says, like, from the moment that we give that money or we offer that job, like we own that person. So I don't think that in this case, like, Turkey understands the limitations of what a New York City mayor can do for the country.
Yeah.
But it's able to cash in favors like this. And, Adams was someone who, like, Nate Silver was touting as a potential president. And so I think they were betting on his future.
Yeah. And they have the money, apparently.
Yeah. And again, it's like you said, it's not really that much money either. At the end of the day, I mean, it's influence, and because of the matching funds program, it's millions and millions of dollars. But Turkey wasn't actually investing all that much money.
All the millions.
We don't have an exact figure, but it's at least over 120,000.
Yeah, I mean, exactly what Nick said, and from their point of view, that money is irrelevant. That's a rounding error. If you're one of these Turkish companies that that are mentioned, Turkish Airlines is mentioned. These are gigantic companies. The Turkish government has billions and billions of dollars. So if you're going to throw a couple 100,000 at maybe a long shot bet to be president, why not? Even if that's just a long shot bet and that money goes out the window, just go ahead and do it. So splash around. You can help get the consulate through quicker. That's good. They'll take that. Another thing too, I really wouldn't sleep on is that, going back to, this is UN General Assembly week. This is the mayor of New York City. He's literally rubbing elbows with leaders from around the world.
Yeah.
And, if he's got it in the back of his head that, man, I owe my friends in Turkey some stuff, who knows what he's saying in these private conversations with other world leaders too. So I really think for them, it's a cheap investment. And so they're gonna keep throwing, and it's not just Turkey, plenty of other countries do this. We document a lot of this. Other countries are going to keep throwing money at our politicians, and they're going to keep selling out for cheap unless we start doing something to punish the countries for doing this. And this is what we keep seeing over and over again, whether it's Turkey, whether it's Israel, whether it's the UAE, Saudi Arabia, we could go down the list of America's so-called friends that keep meddling in America and not getting punished for it. So, shocker, they just keep doing it.
Yeah. And we keep some other dupe. Yeah, because you mentioned low cost to the country, but it's absolutely it is a high cost for Eric Adams because his career is probably finished. I mean, I'm not an expert. I'm in Washington. I'm not in New York, so I'm not steeped in the politics right now. But I mean, they can take him out at this point, from what I understand. And now that he's been indicted, and the governor can replace him or at least remove him until, I guess, another election. But I mean, I don't know how he recovers from this. So, like, the fact that he was able in the short term to get the money for his reelection, but then all of these luxury items and other perks and trips to foreign countries and all that. I mean, really, was it worth it for your entire career as mayor of New York, which, as I mentioned, is like one of the most powerful positions in the United States politics today? For what? And like you said, Ben, these countries don't care about Eric Adams. They'll just move on and find the next person with the outstretched hand.
Right. And you see this more and more in the indictments too, where you just read through these different indictments. There's a recent case with Sumin Terry here in D.C., and she gets indicted for this years long foreign influence entanglements too. And one of her chief crimes, according to the indictment, was taking luxury handbags. And, this is I'm not a handbag connoisseur, but, there were $3,000 handbags mentioned. And, there's the potential that she could go to jail for years for taking handbags. And that just seems, it's just phenomenal to me that in this day and age, we know that the FBI, Department of Justice, other government agencies, they're looking at this with a fine-tooth comb now. It amazes me that people are still willing to take that risk of going to prison in exchange for, some campaign funds and some freaking handbags.
I know.
It's crazy.
It's kind of delusional, and we see this over and again in terms of politicians and others being caught up in scandal, and you say, what were they thinking? But it does seem like there's this element of this. They just kind of they believe that they can't be caught, that they have some special dispensation that others don't have. And then they get caught and they go, oh, wow. I mean, it seems to me, like you said, the FBI's hot on the trail of these cases. You have so many conduits for people reporting, catching you, snitching on you. I mean, the social media aspect of this. I mean, I'm sure he has his enemies inside the government that'd be ready to kick him to the curb and throw him under the bus at any moment. And I wouldn't doubt that something like that happened. So I just feel like really not too smart. I want to get to a couple other cases before we go, because like I said in the opening, this isn't, obviously the first case of a politician being taken in this way and falling for this influence operation to a bad end. We just saw Senator Menendez. I don't know where he is in his sentence. Is he at the sentencing stage at this point? But
he's going.
Can you tell us a little bit quickly about that case? Because it seems as outrageous as this one, if not much, much worse, because it's years.
The Menendez case has it all. Frankly, I mean, it almost reads like a John LeClaire novel, but like if Forrest Gump was the protagonist, just sort of like meandering through a malign foreign influence campaign. I say that because when he was indicted, he's been found guilty on all these charges. So we can say he's been convicted on all of this. Taking literally piles of cash, gold bars. There's a Mercedes Benz in the indictment, so like luxury cars all the way down. At one point in the indictment, it mentions him going to Egypt and getting gold bars, and he was so not savvy that he's literally on the plane on the way back and Googling how much is a gold bar worth. All this ends up in the FBI indictment. And so you read this and you're like, how could somebody be this stupid? And then you realize this was the most powerful man in the Senate when it came to foreign relations. He's literally the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee that authorizes all U.S. arms sales to the world, including over $1 billion every year to the government of Egypt. And that guy was still accepting gold bars and Googling the value of gold bars. The case is just phenomenal. And it was, when that indictment came out, myself and Nick and I think plenty of others, it was a slam dunk. And so, I think it was an easy conviction for DOJ. And I think that was really, really a shot across the bow to your point, Kelly, that nobody's above the law on this anymore. Nobody's getting away with this. And so, if they're willing to indict and convict the most powerful sitting senator when it comes to foreign relations, they're going to get anybody. The mayor of New York City now.
In a state where he's very well connected. So right. New Jersey, it had been involved in New Jersey politics for decades. So he had all the connections and probably a nice safety zone of people who are looking out for him and willing to turn their heads away. And so if you can get at that guy, come on.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't, I mean, my message to your listeners, if you're contemplating a malign foreign influence operation, don't do it. Yeah, I feel weird that I even have to say that, but with all these indictments now, with all these, seemingly smart people doing this, we have to say as a public service announcement, don't do it. Don't engage in malign influence operations.
So and very quickly, Nick, Azerbaijan seems to have a pretty fertile influence operation here in the United States. And Congressman Henry Cuellar was caught up in his own scandal. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Cuellar took after Menendez, took a note from his colleague, and he was also allegedly, because his trial hasn't happened yet, was accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes connected to companies adjacent to the Azerbaijani government. And again, like just the same way Menendez was, the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Cuellar was the chair of the Azerbaijan caucus in the House, and he was also on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And so these are people that are overseeing U.S. foreign policy and arms sales to the region, to these countries that they're on the take for. And so, in Cuellar's case, he was, one of the things that he was influencing was U.S. policy towards Azerbaijan's conflict with Armenia, and specifically, watering down language that would be taking punitive measures towards Azerbaijan for engaging in a military offensive in the Nagorno-Karabakh region, for example. And so, we're seeing a lot of these cases, and I agree with Ben's PSA. Or if you're gonna do it, maybe don't search on your phone how much does a gold bar work, because even in Adam's case, he burned bright and fast. I'll put it that way, because he was also similarly he tried to take a flight from New York City to Easter Island on Turkish Airlines, really out there stuff, pushing the limits of what is possible.
Oh, well, I take your point, just to leave on this note, that we will see probably a string of these and more before these countries actually get the message, and we got to send it to them to stop doing it, because until we can decrease the incentives on some level for these countries to try to buy our members of Congress, there'll be members of Congress as well as mayors and other authorities who will be willing to sell out for it. Really is. It's not only the campaign contributions, which I understand that elections cost so much, and that's a whole other conversation where you have to raise millions of dollars just to run for mayor. No excuse, but there's an incentive to just grab the money wherever you can get it. But then there's this other narcissistic, venal aspect, greedy aspect where handbags, trips to other countries, perks, other luxury items. And it's come on. And I'm sure, like I said, I don't think he'll be able to come back for this, because I think regular New Yorkers are just going to look like, A, you put our safety at risk, and B, we're all scrabbling in the streets trying to make a living, and you're getting all these perks and flying all around. Why aren't you doing the business of the mayor and stop traveling around and getting into other countries' business when you're supposed to be doing your job back home? So I appreciate you guys coming on at last minute to talk about this, and I hope to see you again on Trip the Beltway. Fantastic.
Awesome. This has been great. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you, guys.